Hi, and welcome back. In this video, we will explore what a product backlog is, how it is initially created, and what its key characteristics are. Every product backlog is a container, and it contains ultimately all the requirements that we have. Initially, those requirements are created based on the product goal that we want to achieve. You remember, a product goal should always contain who are we building this for, what are their needs, what is the product and its unique selling or value propositions, and also what kind of value does it deliver to our organization. In most cases, when we start creating those initial product backlog items, we start fairly large. That's why I draw them as clouds. They're not that clear. We don't have acceptance criteria yet. Depending on the tool that you use within your organization, you're probably familiar with the term epic. So let's call these larger items epics, but you can take whatever other name you want to. It's just important to make a distinction between larger items and then smaller items that can be considered for a sprint. These epics can be component-based. For example, if we look at a truck, it could be the cabin, it could be the powertrain, it could be XYZ. The epics can also be goal-based, and that's usually much easier, both in terms of creating the product backlog items and then later also for prioritization. Writing epics as goals has many benefits. First, it's much easier to create them, and second, it is much easier to then prioritize them. So let's again look at the example of the truck. A goal was to have better safety. Another goal was to have less back pain. And each of those goals can be an epic in our initial product backlog. It is fairly obvious that this initial product backlog is not good enough for our sprint planning because developers can't select these items which are A, too big, but maybe even not prioritized as part of their sprint planning. So what we do now is what we refer to as product backlog refinement. And in our previous video, where we looked at the 3C model, we already got a good understanding of what happens in a refinement, which is mainly the conversation between a product owner and the developers. That conversation not only results in adding acceptance criteria to items, but also making these items smaller in themselves. Whenever you're writing down acceptance criteria and you have multiples ands or ors as part of your acceptance criteria, it's a pretty good clue that you can make a cut and make that specific item smaller. So when we look at a ready product backlog, we want it to have the following characteristics. It should be A, prioritized, which means the most important or most valuable items should be at the top, while we account for technical dependencies between the items. Second, we want the product backlog to be detailed appropriately based on the prioritization. That means the items that we consider as valuable should be smaller and more detailed, whereas the items that are not so valuable right now, they can be still fairly vague. They can still be epics. That saves us a lot of time in the initial creation of our product backlog and allows us to move into delivery and development much faster, resulting in quicker feedback cycles. There are two other characteristics that we would want a product backlog to have. The first one is that product backlog being emergent. Emergent means the product backlog is a living document. Based on the conversations with our stakeholders, we would probably add new items to our backlog, reprioritize existing items, break them down, or maybe remove items that are not longer valuable to us. The other characteristic that we want a product backlog to have is it to be estimated. This does not have to be the full backlog, but ideally the part at the top which we have already detailed down. So looking at all four characteristics, we can quickly summarize and also remember them based on the following acronym. Roman Pickler, a fellow trainer, created this acronym a few years ago, and it's called DEEP. The D stands for detailed appropriately, the first E for emergent, the second E for estimated, and the P at the end stands for prioritized. This is not a ranking in terms of which characteristic is more important than the other. It just helps us to always remember which characteristics for the product backlog we are aiming for. I hope this brief video gave you a good understanding of how a product backlog is initially created, how it is refined to become a ready product backlog, and what we actually consider a ready product backlog to be. In our next videos, we will deep dive on two topics: estimation and prioritization. See you in those videos.